Welcome to the Eduverse Enigma podcast. Today we're chatting with James Hutson, the lead XR disruptor at Lindenwood University. This episode, we'll be discussing the importance of AI and XR in the future of education, gamification, NFTs, and the best available educational VR softwares. You won't want to miss it.
Happy to have you here on the podcast so that we can share some of that knowledge that you've gained yourself and from others.
Absolutely. Glad to talk. Glad to be here today.
Awesome. Well, kicking us off, I guess to start, just for anybody that doesn't know who you are, can you give a little bit of background of yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm Dr. James Hutson, lead XR disruptor at Lindenwood University. It's a mid-sized private college right outside of St. Louis in St. Charles, Missouri. I help oversee our XR initiatives, the XR lab, research, integrating into the curriculum, ensuring that we are maximizing the potential and that all students have the ability to experience this amazing technology and the benefits that come along with it that they wouldn't otherwise have.
Amazing. I remember from our conversations a while back, you were looking at having like all students have to purchase VR headsets. Is that still in the works and where you're heading or where you're at already? Or
Yes. So there are several initiatives. We started with the VR integration and adoption project, which was initial exploratory grant funded opportunity that got our first batch of Quest 2s that started research, developing and gathering together VR champions in all areas of the institution. In developing educational resources and a database, which I don't know why there's not just a shared database for everyone to use. If I want an educational app or geology, or geography, what should I be using? So we started all that and moved on to the next one, which was what we were just talking about a moment ago, operationalizing educational design studio to help make these original bespoke experiences if they don't exist for different areas. So we did that. And then the third one that you mentioned, you were talking about, is we started 2 years ago with 3 select programs and had all the students. We went entirely OER, so there were no textbook costs. We didn't pass that off at an average of about $1,200 a year for your average undergraduate. And instead had them purchase a Quest 2, which we called an experiential textbook. So that they used it in every class. We could use educational apps. We could take them to places around the world, etc. So it pretty much, the value proposition paid for itself relatively quickly once you explain that we're all OERs. So we did that. That's going great. We're expanding both the OER side so we can then support more of the VR and XR developments. Now, I guess I shouldn't say VR, because with the next one, everything's MR. So, we'll have the headsets that can both now. So, we just have to figure out how to budget that in with the, the Quest 2 Pro being $1,500 and, similarly for Google and for the others being developed around the same price point. So the next initiatives, we have a task force for OER to move on that and to also couple and create original XR experiences for all OERs. And so that, if you have a class in statistics, we also develop, an educational experience that can be mixed reality, virtual reality, or augmented reality, or on a desktop for compliance, and can accompany that and support the learning through active learning kind of scenarios to do something. So that's happening now with the XR Vision Task Force as well. Scaling out and training more people is kind of the problem. Is you have 1 or 2 experts in an institution that that may be passionate and tinker with putting these together, with game engines or WebXR or Bring or something. But you don't have you generally don't have the plan put in place to scale that out, right, and teach others how to do it. So that's what we're doing now is, building and upskilling, core individuals to create those, train all of our instructional designers, right? We have for both online and hybrid, high flex and on ground classes to be able to do that. So they can, someone comes to them. So for instance, one of our philosophy professors wanted to do the allegory of the cave from Plato's Republic. And show them how that would actually work. So he's working right now to do that, but we're also training them how to actually put it together. More and more great drag and drop options are out there that don't require a lot of additional coding skills. So we're going to see that coming out more and more. I mean, you just had what was the wonderful app that just came out, which allows you to drag and drop any number of things in the environment. It was officially launched, I think, 3 days ago. I'm trying to think of the name of it, but more and more of those, keep coming out, and I'll do it here in a second. So really scaling out so that both, you have instructors, they're all excited about it, but they might not know what to do with it, or there might not be relevant for their specific field. We find in certain areas. So it might be really great for the natural sciences and or astronomy, for instance. There's lots of apps out there with the stars and galaxies, or you want to go to the space station. But if someone wanted something on environmental biology and on the wetlands or something, environmental impact of certain types of industrial runoff, then we could create that for them. But that's what's happening now is kind of moving beyond exposing people to it. And we constantly have about 4 or 5 research studies going in different classes, gathering feedback and publishing to make sure that we know what's effective, the best pedagogical way to really integrate XR into the curriculum, using Bloom's taxonomy, and then what new and engaging things can we do next, right? And the more you involve students in that iterative process, the better it is for everyone.
For sure. No, that's such a great way to go about it, doing those research studies and involving the students as they're going through. To take a step back, though, like you're talking about having those 1 to 3 experts on campus and trying to expand that. I guess first, how did you as a professor get interested in virtual reality and want to apply it? And then from there, like, lots of schools we're talking to, seems like at Lindenwood, a lot of people are excited, but some schools we're talking to, there's those 1 to 3 experts, but then everybody else is kind of wary about integrating it, even if there are fits for their class. So like, how are you kind of showing those benefits and kind of pushing that forward inside the university?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, and we are lucky in that we had so many that were really excited, but had no idea where to start or what to do or hadn't even used it. They just loved it. But to go back, it was originally, I was previously a dean for all online graduate programs. And that was a way that we were looking into engaging more with online community, distance education communities, to figure out how do we bring them into the same space if they're in Germany, Ibiza or Japan all at the same time, to engage in an active or collaborative activity, et cetera. So that's where it started. But given that my background's actually in art history, I was the perfect test case. In that what already exists, going back to, the Google VR, or Google Earth, way back with Google Cardboard, is the ability effectively to take any student anywhere you want. And since that's all we do is show slides, here are the pyramids of Giza, here's the Great Sphinx, here's the Parthenon, just flat projections on a wall, the ability to take them there in hue and scale and show them what it feels like to walk around these things, allow them to internalize and understand much better the cultural context. So it worked very well for mine. It was pretty easy to sell all of our folks on it in cultural heritage, arts and culture, because we can show the value added right off the bat. You can take them to all these locations anywhere you want. But then following that up, I put out just a general call and started talking to other people I knew were already interested in it or had used it. Maybe every institution has someone who had been using an HTC Vive or something, that's a little bit older, previous generations of the technology. So starting with them and then actually getting the headsets to show others what can actually be done. Because, I always equate it to like skydiving or spelunking or something, right? So VR is something you have to experience. You can't tell someone what it's like. And so the easiest selling point to get anyone on board is just to have them use it, right? So anyone that I have tried from ages of, obviously, at the time I had a 5-year-old, so he didn't have it on for more than a few minutes, but everyone from 5 until, 89 years of age, I've demoed this on. And as soon as they see it, they understand it and understand what the potential is. And immediately, if you're an educator, you will your mind will start reeling and thinking about ways in which, I could do this. I teach, secondary education, and I want, my students to learn how to identify someone who may have ADHD or is slipping behind in reading in a class. And so I want them to make those mistakes and fail, in virtual reality before, doing it in the classroom and potentially affecting someone. So they immediately start thinking about these. So we had another professor, I just showed him in the College of Education. And he's like, wow, could you actually scan an entire building and then take people through it and allow them to point out OSHA violations or mission and vision and all that? We're like, yeah, of course we can do it. So once you just show people, put it on them, the potential becomes almost instantaneously understood. So that's really the best advice, that I would give anyone trying to show others, what could be done with this and why it's not just a passing fad or a gimmick. It's not technology for technology's sake. We have lots of research and we continue to do research. Many centers have research on XR to show how it improves, once again, time on task, memory retention, engagement, motivation, collaboration skills. We're running an entire pilot on a VR only class for first year experience as part of a high impact practice this fall. So every class and every experience is in VR, and they're hitting all the major graduate attributes as they go. And so they're getting experience learning the base competencies. So now we're going to do something in VR that's going to let us practice teamwork and leadership or critical thinking or communication skills, right? So they're all tied to those transferable, durable, or previously known as soft skills, now power skills that can be done much more effectively in a virtual setting and from anywhere. And what that does really is democratize education. It makes it much more egalitarian in that people that may be in rural areas or underfunded inner city schools have the ability to see what would otherwise be out of reach, and only in well-funded, affluent areas that can afford field trips and study abroad and taking people to all these museums and taking them to these cultural experiences, whether it be an opera or a play or an orchestra, right? You can sit them right in front of it. So all of this becomes the kind of great equalizer. We use it properly.
Oh, for sure. And I love how you were saying, like, you've had 5-year-olds to 89-year-olds. We have 5-year-old, 5 to 95, because 95-year-old's birthday party once. So it's so great to have so many different age groups and backgrounds, and then just like you said, democratizing with our defenders of the Eduverse. Goal there is to make education more accessible, engaging, and impactful. And touched on all three of those points there. So I love that advice. People inside of VR to really experience. That's how you convince people about VR. Yes. On that note, what are some of your go-to demos you show people when they're going to VR for the first time? And then beyond that, had to pick one, what's kind of your favorite VR educational software that you're using right now?
Oh, goodness. Oh, that's hard. Okay. So I can answer the first one. So demoing for our president and our board of directors and all that to show them why this is important because they hadn't used it either. So, or even with, we'll take it. We have a project, a group, I guess I would say, and that works with teaching technology to the elderly. So we'll bring VR headsets to nursing homes, for instance, or retirement. And across the board, what works best first, just to show them what's possible. Everyone wants to gravitate towards travel and experience. And so I just go to, once again, the Oculus TV channels, on travel. And they're like, hey, okay, what part of the world do you want to go to? Do you want to swim with sharks? Do you want to hike a mountain? Do you want to parasail? Whatever that is. But interestingly enough, everyone chooses, they say, what experience do you want? And especially, I wouldn't say it's especially, but everyone chooses to get that immersive experience, to be able to transport themselves somewhere else, and that gives them an immediate understanding of the capabilities. So they might go to the pyramids, they might go to Nepal, into to see what monks living conditions are actually like, or they want to go Mount Everest, or they want to fly. But it's all the same thing. It's showing the potential of what you can do. Seated, starting off, obviously, so try to avoid VR sickness. Short videos around no more than 5 minutes starting off, no jarring, shifting, and or roller coasters the first time. So all the standard things that you want to avoid VR sickness. But just a short introduction of embodying this virtual world of virtual content where we start. Beyond that, once we need to move them past 3 DOF to 6 DOF, so they actually can move around in the environment in all directions. We need to show them everything that can be done. So we then do things like first steps and the other training, exercises that every major platform has to showcase the ability from the hands function to the controllers and everything, and then move into the wider world of educational application. So I think right now, as simple as it is, but it's been incredibly effective for a wide number of different exercises and assignments, is actually Rec Room, believe it or not. So, the Horizon, the Horizon worlds and the office space and everything, that's worked well for presentations, et cetera. But, much like Alt Space VR, which again, I saw someone at College Mount Calvary do a great example of a psychology class in that. But you need some type of environment that is scalable, that's kind of world size, that you can bring in different objects that they can engage and interact with in some collaborative fashion. So those type of platforms seem to work for the widest kind of range of learning outcomes. The really tailored ones, I use honestly, things like Wander, or basically just upgrade Google Earth. Because what we'll do is have Wander Wednesdays. So we'll have students from all over the world, take us to their hometowns, show us around and talk about where they're from and what's important to them and their culture, or their favorite spot, or their favorite monument. Tell us why. And then we can use that as a way for the students to bond across distance, for socialization, collaboration, and it makes it a lot easier. So we just finished, of course, another study which confirmed previous studies, and that is that people with social anxiety disorder, ASD, and or just social awkwardness in general find it much easier to skip past, that awkward initial getting to know you phase in class, and immediately move on to content and discussing the meat of something, if they can do so in a virtual environment with an avatar. And so we confirmed that again in 3 different studies this fall in various populations from freshmen to graduates, so all ages. And so it works better. And so that's what I know, but because I'm an art historian, taking people in museums is kind of what we do. But the ability to leverage the socializing aspects of it, bringing people together is what really works. A lot of other ones, Nat Geo has several great ones out to where you can go to Machu Picchu, et cetera, climb mountains, et cetera. There are several others that show like ecological kind of examples of different types of terrain and environments around the world. We're working with ArcGIS and bringing VR into that as well for the local zoo that we have here, and showing different types of habitats and environments. So that works really well, especially for secondary education, or middle school kind of age students. That really biosphere kind of approach works for them. But aside from that, flexible free platforms that anyone can use. I'm trying to think of the major ones that which you can help me here. One of the major ones that we're using, you can bring them into, the classroom space or whatever you want, bring in, DNA, show a crocodile flying over your head, watch yourself present to something else and then get feedback that way.
Is that an Engage or?
That's Engage. So
Yeah.
Engage is one we've used several times, up to like 20 students, and it's free. There's greater functionality beyond that. There's 4 others. We've tried like Noda and Spatial and others for design thinking exercises, an iterative process of UX development, for instance. That works really well if you can, connect different thoughts and or build things out, in a space together with other individuals and show them the design process, the design thinking process. But yeah, there are so many, and every day more get launched, and we can actually tailor them and make our own if we want, and put them up there, and do a side load or a side quest, link it, and have whatever package you want, downloaded to any of the students. That's how we had them play test our educational video game, The Museum of the Lost, in the spring. Was we just sent them, once again, the API download instructions, and then they all could play something that was still in the beta version that we built in Unity. So it's from beginner to expert, pretty much everyone can benefit from XR.
Amazing. I love how much experimenting that you're doing and willing to do, like in class with students, because it can be scary sometimes when you're adopting a new software and you're jumping for the first time, especially something like Rec Room. You look at that and it's like, oh, it's just a gaming platform. We've been using Remio lately, but for the past year or so, we were using Rec Room, where we had our club. Our whole team would get together, we'd write on whiteboards, and then we'd go play paintball or something afterwards, and that was our start of our weeks. So I think that's so cool, and I love the Wander Wednesdays as well, and how you can bring students together for more of those like social activities, because that's a big part of like enjoying VR that we saw as well. If it's not just for class, it's for these other types of experiences. Amazing.
Exactly. We ran another one. It's funny you mentioned paintball, because the professor who is running the VR only class right now, that's his go-to at paintball to teach leadership and teamwork. So, that's wonderful.
That's amazing.
So, yeah. And we were, I was just thinking if there was another educational, collaborative app I was thinking of there, but please go on.
Yeah, I guess off of that, like you were saying, you're partnering with the zoo to build out those simulations and work together there. Wondering, like, are you doing a lot of those kind of industry partnerships where you're partnering with others in the area to have something that's like built out for training students that's then directly applicable in the industry?
Yes. So we're in the beginning phases. So we're about 2 years in, and more are going right now as well, such as for creating ABA types of training and environments to help children with disabilities and or special education teachers. So that's one that's being developed. But yeah, industry is a partner that's often overlooked in education that we certainly would recommend others look into. And do you have these? If your institution doesn't have a strong XR lab, game design department, or a strong computer science department that maybe it would be housed in, then reaching out. What are the XR companies near you locally? So start building connections. Reach out and say, hey, we're an educational partner. We would love to work on you. Get some grants. You develop the simulations. We can handle the subject matter expertise, and then we can do this for industry, for training, for the Department of Labor, for there's any number of possibilities, but certainly training in industry, engineering, safety protocols, all of that. But then also all the soft skills. Walmart, Amazon, all of them, are now having their employees learn these durable and transferable skills of dealing with, irate customers or something, or de-escalating situations. We're working on another one to help train educational administrators de-escalate situations with angry parents, such as if you have to suspend someone for fighting is one of the classic examples. How do we then train them to de-escalate that, or to talk about sensitive situations or topics, such as Black Lives Matter, for instance, in schools and policies around that. So there's really a kind of a limitless kind of way in which XR can be leveraged. I mean, we also looked at leveraging XR to improve empathy in a social psychology class in the spring that was just presented on a conference last week, to improve implicit bias scores so that students would become even more aware of their own implicit bias on the standard test that's used for that. So yeah, there's any number of things, but just reaching out to any of the companies that have the hardware and software, reaching out to, the HP, to Apple, to ask them, if they want to offer you hardware and or support, using their services and their biometrics and their, once again, what they're able to provide, because it's symbiotic. And so you're able to, sorry about that. You're able to showcase what their equipment can possibly do. But reaching out is always good first.
Oh, that's awesome to hear that you're partnering with so many industries, and that's great advice just to reach out to the people that are in like the VR industry, whether it be in hardware or software, just to start making those connections, and you never know where they're going to lead. Where you have time, so do you mind if we go over by a couple minutes, or do you got a hard stop?
No, I just have to get to Dawn quiet, so get her.
Okay, for sure.
Oh, good. Please continue.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll won't take too much more of your time. Just two more questions on like rapid fire.
Sure.
So curious. Obviously, it seems like, or you already are implementing in education VR and XR, and see the impact of where it's heading in the next 5 to 10 years. But you're like one of the only schools that I see that is implementing at such a wide scale. And then obviously there's a bunch of other amazing schools that are starting to implement it in individual programs. What do you think are some of the major barriers have to be overcome, whether lower cost hardware, more software available, or on the institutional side, or need to change institution based or government like funding based or anything along those lines for it to reach that mass adoption?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of the above, but the most specific and pointed examples that we have run into, and what others at other institutions have run into, is first is the cost of hardware. So getting the hardware to students, and that was a great strategy by Meta, starting at the very low price of original Quest 2 out there. But the next iteration kind of priced out a lot of educational institutions for mass adoption. So, having a reasonably priced and accessible hardware, but second, also an enterprise system, which can be supported relatively easily and without a lot of staff in the IT side, to be able to control the educational apps and push them out where you need them, when you need them. Because we spend a lot of time, and I know others do as well, just on refreshing, upkeep, uploading apps, purchasing them, updating them, trying to get them, and especially since they kind of decoupled from the Facebook accounts, example of Meta, we can no longer use, one account and stream and connect it to 4 different devices. It's got to be a one-to-one, which further complicates it without our educational enterprise system. So low-cost hardware, I mean, there is so much free software out there right now that's not really an impediment. That's not really a barrier to adoption. People just knew about it or took advantage of databases that we put together, others have put together. So there's some great databases out there that people are building. And a lot of it's free. But it's, how do you get the headsets to the student, give them access to it? Considering the different types of students in different areas. Are they distance learning? Are they online? Are they abroad? Are there limitations? Are they on a military base? Like one of my students I talked to, Qatar. So are there limitations on what kind of technology they can have and where, and what access they have to networks? So those are considerations. But low cost hardware, software is there, an enterprise system that is self-consciously built in and baked in from the outset, would preferable for platforms. But the other challenges would be you have to have administrative support, or else it just becomes, as you were mentioning, just pockets of individuals that are trying things in one class or one program or one small area of an institution. And the impact, and the rest of the institution might not even know that they're doing it. And the impact is very limited. There's just not a ripple effect to how many students, outside of a small, say, computer science classroom get to experience this. And so you need administrative support saying this is something that's important. We're going to be doing it. We're going to put resources behind it. Doesn't have to be a large amount of resources, but some support and resources. And then you have to get IT involved. We need some type of support system to keep it going. So, I started off and got the ball rolling, but I needed to hand it off to a group to maintain the hardware, to update the software, the apps, to upload things when needed, to be there when students, need to use the equipment in the lab, train them how to use it. So you need that kind of IT buy-in and personnel kind of support as well. Those are the main ones that we've run into so far, because there's so much awesome stuff out there for free. You just need the hardware, and you just need access.
For sure. And no, that's a really great point of involving the IT department, because I think that's something that's overlooked, especially at the start. Obviously, once down the road, you start looking into it, you don't really realize that when you have 5 headsets. So I can just update these myself and hand them out to students. But when you get up in hundreds, if not thousands of headsets, or just different pieces of software that you're working, so that's super complicated. So good point to get them involved. One last question before I do the rapid fire questions. Who is somebody that you look up to in the XR space, especially maybe in the education space, that you might follow on LinkedIn or any other social media that you would recommend other people check out and see if them on the podcast?
Oh yeah, I think you know a lot of them. So Rob Thoreau obviously is really great at Georgia College. He is amazing. All the stuff he's doing now with paramedicine and the other just trained firefighters and first responders. So he is a great resource, an amazing human being. Others, you have like Jonathan Richter, who's the head of the Immersive Learning Research Network. So I'm on their publications team for their conference, but it's a great group of people all committed to ensuring that that XR is fully utilized in the educational space, and there's research to support it. So having very robust and rigorous research to show how beneficial it is from pedagogical and learning standpoint. There are lots of others. Maya Drajewski, so she's great as far as a futurist in that space. Enrique Cachafiero at Duke University, so handling their lab. He's a great resource, especially for kind of the WebXR side. David Neville at Grinnell College, he's great. He's head of their XR lab and comes from a background in language. So building his own immersive experiences to help teach different foreign languages. So he's great for that. Good. There's so many amazing folks. Andrew, I'm trying to think, who's actually at University of Wisconsin Stout, Andrew Wright. That's right. Andrew Wright, RIGHT. So, he worked with us as a consultant. He designed, Witness Revolution at NEH, sponsored a grant for an educational VR kind of experience. So we used him in kind of building out our Museum of the Lost as our first step at doing that as well. So that's a great resource. There are so many amazing people. So
yeah, no, I'm sure you could go on and on, just like me as well. There's so many people out there that are willing to help and sharing advice. So that's a great list to share. When you're reaching out to those people, just can have this type of conversation with them as well. I guess along those lines of being able to help and give resources, you mentioned that you have like libraries through Lindenwood. Are any of those public? Yeah.
All public, all freely available. Share them however you can. We have educational resources for you for educators at all levels and ideas in all different fields. So what you would be doing in business versus humanities or social sciences, or So all of that's there. But really, one of the most useful things we've been collecting is building an educational application database. And then ensure that it's searchable. So the first one was pretty much a static website that we had to update continuously. We just switched it over to a new searchable database. Our digital librarian did, Chris Skotowski, so he's great. He just did that last week. So no, it's on the website. We need eventually to have some type of shared database that all of these networks can add to. And when they find it, they're like, oh, this is a new one that just came out. You need to use this for geology, right? So here's a great one for geography. Here's one for biology. You can go inside the human heart. This one's a nuclear reactor, right? So, but just to get that kind of critical mass, because very often I'm told by some that you asked about some faculty and their hesitancy in adopting it. They would say, well, there's nothing out there for me. Just like, and sometimes they may be right, that being not yet, or you might not know about, right? Or it might be on one headset, but doesn't port to another, or isn't compatible with another. And so, but usually there's something out there for everyone. They just don't know. And so, but absolutely use all of our resources.
Awesome. I'll definitely find those on the website. If I can't, I might reach out to get pointed in the right direction. I love that idea of having that like group database in the future where different industry groups can go on there. That'd be amazing to say, like, people can update it saying, I'm using this in my class in this semester. And see, oh, this is used 5 times by this professor semester back to back. Along those lines. It'd be awesome to be able to see that out. I love that idea. I guess from here, just to jump into some rapid fire, just to curious on, I guess, your opinions and your for people to learn a little bit more about like the VR. So I'm just going to say like 1 or 2 words, and then if you could respond with just a quick like 1 or 2 words, what comes to your head first. So we got some random ones mixed in here. So pop culture is the first one.
Oh yeah. So let's see, Star Wars, Marvel. Let's see what else
Love
is
it.
going on
Love
there.
That's perfect. Yeah, perfect. Conferences.
Oh, IEEE, iLearn, checks, IHSES. Good. There's so many.
Oh, that's perfect. Perfect. Unity or Unreal?
Oh, that's tricky. So
You can skip
I mean,
if you want. If I don't want to start any fights.
okay. So that's the yes. So I guess the first 2 words you'd say functionality versus visuals, right? So being that Unity is a great tool. It's dominating the industry. It's really good for what it does. But Unreal now has its own niche and is doing a lot of other wonderful things with AI, metahumans, billions of polygons that just blow everything out of the water. So they're tools for different things.
For sure. Okay, makes a lot of sense. Perfect. Educational NFTs.
We were just okay. So the first word, let's see, blockchain, grammar, gamification, game-based learning. We're doing, it's funny you mentioned that. Just today, we came up with a way to teach English composition and blockchain at the same time. And it was through gamifying it and using NFTs as currency in the game as they progress and become more proficient with using more advanced types of grammar. And so, but that's exactly, NFTs are really fun.
Interesting. Love to hear that you're looking into it and that you're already applying it. And very interesting. The metaverse.
Potential, perspective. Trying to think of words. Aspirational. Right. So, so I love, I know a lot of people don't like the term metaverse. A lot of people don't like, it pushed in a centralized way because it's decentralized. But a version of Web 3.0 of a 3D internet, of the ability to engage in multiple types of platforms, multiple devices, and in different ways, in 3 dimensions. It's already happening. So it's how about inevitable? There you go. That's one of the best words. It is
awesome.
inevitable.
Awesome. Love it. Love it. There's a there's a company that I follow, and their company name's Inevitable, and it's all about Web3 and the metaverse. I love that. Education.
Say education?
Education.
Education. Outmoded, disruptive, passive. I'm just thinking of that. When I hear the original term, education, I think of the sage on the stage, or having one content expert that is dumping information into a group that are passively kind of ingesting the information, regurgitate it back. So, but that's where XR completely changes. Is you have now an unprecedented access to information like never before in history. So that's not the problem. No longer do I need to be an expert in, biochemistry or cardiology. You can learn all that, with a touch of your phone. But how to apply it and engage with it, the framework. So really, we're moving on to this active learning stage of education. So education 2.0, 3.0, whatever you want to call it. In that educators become learning facilitators instead of experts. And so I would say, hopefully we're looking at the potential for the future of education to be much more engaging, impactful, and interactive.
Awesome. I love that idea of the future. Favorite book?
Oh, Dave. Yes. Do androids dream of electric sheep? That's
Okay.
right. So that's the Philip K. Dick novel that turned into Blade Runner. But
Okay. Very interesting.
wonderful book. Yeah. So yeah.
I guess kind of goes with that, but favorite.
Favorite movie is actually Alien. So
Alien,
I got
okay.
there. So the second one, I love the original one. It's really just a gothic horror set, with space truckers, in that way. The one, the second one, it's just a perfect film. It's just, wonderful. You really took, a military film, and tied it in, a sci-fi film, but it's all the original stories about James Cameron's mother, who supported him all the way through his creative endeavors. And so it's about two mothers, each other protecting their children. So it works on so many levels.
Love it. And last one, talk XR or blockchain that's on your mind from the past couple of weeks.
Oh God. Yeah. So that's generative AI generative cinema and art. So so that's what we're working on now. Is the quick adoption and how fast this technology just surpassed what anyone thought possible, maybe 10 years from now. So we need to adjust our clocks and start thinking about what we need to be doing now, because it's already a possibility, and what's going to be possible 5 years from now. So if you already have, the kind of deep fake technology to take, a digital twin of an actor like Bruce Willis or Darth Vader selling his voice, in perpetuity, then the generative capacity of AI for XR experiences is the next gen that we haven't thought of yet. So we're still kind of either, filming, doing a mixture of that and or game engines in order to create different 3D models that are animated, but then being able to seamlessly do that through text prompts and drawing on, say upload all the movies in one genre for the last 50 years. And I want you to do, a scene where there's a plane flying in World War II that's getting shot down, and you have flak. And it'll do all of that in a split second, compared to how laborious that would be in the past. So from an educational perspective, that's incredibly exciting, because you're going to have people that don't have the skills now to do all the coding, to understand machine learning, to understand data sets, that will be able to type in, I want to see Caesar being stabbed in the Senate, right? And then voila, right? You're going to have an AI generate that for you, and you can walk around. So that's one of the simple kind of plug and play, application that I see coming next for educators.
Very interesting. Not think that's where you were going to go with that question. And yeah, that's a very interesting topic that I've been exploring a little bit with Dolly and Dolly 2 and those sorts of areas, but definitely it's going to be a big game changer for, like you're saying, movies, but as well building out 3D environments in the future. Very interesting. James.
Yep. Yeah, I was going to say I have our chair of game design here who we're doing another study together, and he realized that his idea put him out of a job because put together AI with 3D modelers, 3ds Max, Maya, Blender, whatever you want, with the new ability to text prompts for animation, and it'll build it. I want a green goblin, that's going to jump, slash at someone, then snark, right? So you just type that in, does all of it for you now. So that pipeline completely changed.
Yes.
So it's funny you mentioned that.
Yeah, no, I don't know if you've seen Promethean AI, but a really cool tool for building 3D environments without the animation side of things. It plugs right into your Unreal, and we're looking at them for a while.
Yeah, check that.
Yeah, it's definitely the future. And I guess my hope is it's not stealing jobs. It's allowing people that are creative to just use their creative energy and sit back and do all those tedious tasks.
Thank you. You just summed up the next 3 studies we're doing with the AI generator, because it's not the death of art. It's not the death of creativity. It gives you new tools to do more things and focus on the conceptual aspects. Brilliant. That's exactly right.
Love it. Love it. So yeah, James, thank you so much for coming on to the Eduverse podcast. Would just love to give you a couple more minutes if there's any projects or any asks or anything of anybody that's listening to be able to help with or learn from want to share.
Yeah, no, we have lots of projects going, and really just preparing students for any future and the future that they're actually going to, and not teaching them or training them for a world that no longer exists is really what we're interested in. And so putting AI tools in their hands, putting, once again, giving them the skills that they will need to understand and interpret and be responsible, ethical citizens and thinkers, with what technology is doing and how it's making these decisions. So with that, there's a number of different research projects. I'd love to talk to anyone who's interested. Everything from, as we mentioned, AI, generative cinema, art. We're especially interested in the use of XR to support neurodiversity efforts and supporting those with ASD or autism. That's another one in helping those with autism in the workplace. So how can technology bridge for that? BA therapies, gamification, for education, simulations, digital twins for cultural heritage preservation. That's another big one we're looking into. So, think about all of the priceless and irreplaceable monuments that are being destroyed in the Ukraine now, and that were destroyed, say, in the Middle East, during ISIS. We're partnered with the University of Mosul as well. So, giving people the tools and upskilling them to be able to capture, endangered and or vulnerable, monuments or cultural heritage that is ephemeral, for instance. So, all of that and more. So anything involving ArcGIS, geography, VR and drones. So, there's pretty much runs the gamut, blockchain. We're looking into the regulatory side of the regulatory side and the legal considerations of the metaverse, starting with digital or virtual real estate, and the challenges there that are being faced. As you saw just yesterday or the day before, Apple halted all transactions associated with NFTs, through both their iPhone and iPad, because they were losing revenue. And so, it's a regulatory consideration we're going to have to deal with the metaverse, because you can't have a metaverse without a decentralized economy that is shared, among multiple networks, platforms, et cetera, using blockchain. So, so that's another interest there. So there's a lot. So pretty much anyone who's interested in research in the metaverse, XR, anything in that area, we would love to talk to them.
Amazing. Well, that's what the Eduverse community is all about. Definitely people that are following me and XpertVR. So I hope that after posting this podcast and sharing it there, you get some people reaching out. I'll make sure that your contact information is shared with it so that they can reach out to you. And I'm excited to see what Lindenwood gets up to and what you get up to with all these partnerships you work on. It's amazing work. Thank you so much for taking time out of your visit to jump on the podcast and chat.
Quite welcome. It's always a pleasure. You're doing great work. So just keep up everything that you're doing as well. And I look forward to seeing what defenders of the Eduverse are going to come up with next.
Love it. Thank you, James.